Let me paint you a picture. Imagine a country that's basically just a long, jagged strip of granite and ice. For centuries, its whole economy was built on fish, trees, and, well, being the kind of poor cousin of Scandinavia. Then, one day, they found the greatest treasure chest in human history. This is the incredible story of how Norway hit the lottery and then did the most shocking thing of all. They decided not to blow it.
I mean, the change is just staggering. It's hard to even wrap your head around. Before they found oil, Norway was a nation of serious austerity. We're talking you needed a government permit just to buy a car all the way up until 1960. Flash forward to today, and every single citizen, every man, woman, and child is, on paper, a trust fund baby worth over $250,000. So how on earth did they go from herring and hardship to a nation of stockholders?
Well, it all started out there in the North Sea. And for Norwegians, that sea wasn't a bank vault. It was a graveyard for ships and sailors. They were absolutely convinced their cold, angry ocean was empty. In fact, their own top experts were dead sure of it.
You're seeing that right. This quote might just be the single worst professional prediction in economic history. Seriously, it's like the geological version of a record label saying, "The Beatles have no future in show business." While Norway's best and brightest were saying, "Nothing to see here, folks," geology, well, it turns out geology doesn't really care what the experts think.
So, what happened was this. A huge gas discovery down in the Netherlands suddenly made everybody look north. The big international oil companies show up, probably thinking they could swindle these country bumpkins. But then this lawyer, Jens Evensen, makes an incredibly bold move. He just unilaterally declares that Norway owns the entire seabed. And after years of drilling and finding nothing, just as they were about to pack it all in, Phillips Petroleum hits the absolute jackpot. And get this, it was on Christmas Eve, 1969. A true Christmas miracle. Okay, so the oil was there. Amazing. But now came the really hard part. You see, finding oil can be a curse. It can totally destroy a nation from the inside out. Norway was holding the winning lottery ticket, but they also kind of had a gun to their head. They needed a plan, and they needed one fast.
This one question from an Iraqi geologist who'd moved to Norway for his family changed everything. Now, that might sound like a tiny difference in wording, right? But it was the difference between salvation and total ruin. See, becoming an oil nation means you let the oil dominate everything, corrupt everything. But being a nation that has oil, well, that means you stay in control.
And to stay in control, they created their own company, Statoil. The problem was Norway had no oil engineers, no technology, nothing. So Statoil's #1 job wasn't actually to drill for oil. Its job was to be a sponge, to absorb every last drop of knowledge from the foreign companies who knew what they were doing.
This plan was just unbelievably audacious. It was basically state-sponsored corporate espionage, but completely out in the open. Can you imagine telling a master baker, "Hey, I'm going to work for you, but you have to pay my salary, and you have to teach me all your secret family recipes so I can open my own competing bakery right next door"? That's literally what Norway did to the biggest oil companies in the world.
And then, just for good measure, came the knockout blow. On top of everything else, they slopped a 78% tax on profits. A 78% tax. The companies screamed bloody murder, called it robbery. But Norway called their bluff. They knew the oil was top quality and, crucially, in a politically stable country. So the companies grumbled, but they stayed, because even 22% of a monster fortune is still a fortune.
So, the money starts pouring in, and now Norway has to face a new and maybe even more dangerous enemy, itself. Because history is just littered with the wreckage of countries that got rich quick and then completely fell apart. Norway had to figure out how to dodge that curse.
And this curse actually has a name. It's called the Dutch disease. It works like this. A huge flood of oil money strengthens your currency. That sounds great, right? But what it really does is make everything else you produce, your fish, your timber, whatever, way too expensive for other countries to buy. Your entire economy gets addicted to that one resource. And when the oil runs out, you're left with absolutely nothing.
So what did Norway do? They made a decision that required almost inhuman levels of discipline. They decided not to spend the money. That's right. Instead, they took every single dollar of profit from the oil and immediately shipped it out of the country, investing it all in global stocks, bonds, and real estate.
And that single decision created this, the largest sovereign wealth fund on the entire planet. What they did was genius. They turned a finite resource, oil that will one day run out, into a perpetual financial machine of stocks and bonds. They turned a temporary windfall into permanent wealth.
And they were smart about it too.
They didn't put all their eggs in one basket. The fund is this massive, globally diversified portfolio. They own shares in over 9,000 different companies across 70 countries, everything from Apple to Nestlé. They own some of the most expensive real estate in London, Paris, and New York.
Now, just let this number sink in for a second. If you could gather up every single publicly traded company on Earth into one giant pile, the nation of Norway would own 1.5% of the whole thing. The next time you walk down a street in any major city, there's a pretty good chance that Norway owns a piece of the companies around you, and maybe even the building you're standing in. It's wild.
But, having a $1 trillion savings account creates a very unique political problem. Every single day, politicians face this immense temptation to just crack it open, solve today's problems with tomorrow's money. So how do they resist that?
They protect themselves from themselves with this brilliant rule, the Handlingsregeln. Think of it as a national chastity belt. It's a genius piece of financial engineering. The government is only allowed to spend the investment profits, the interest, basically, which is about 3% a year. The original capital, the oil money itself, is never, ever touched. This basically ensures the fund will last forever.
Visitors to Norway ask this all the time. You guys are sitting on a mountain of cash. Why isn't everything perfect? Why are there still potholes? And the Norwegian answer is always the same. Because if we fix today's pothole with tomorrow's pension money, we are literally stealing from our own grandchildren. It is delayed gratification on a national scale.
And if you want to see why that discipline matters so much, you just have to look at Alberta, Canada. They found oil around the same time, they started a similar fund, but they didn't have a strict spending rule. So whenever times got a little tough or an election was coming up, politicians dipped into the piggy bank. The result? 100-fold difference in value. The difference isn't geology, it's discipline.
But all of this incredible wealth, this amazing story of foresight, it comes with a massive moral shadow. You see, Norway has branded itself as a global leader of the Green Revolution, but its entire fortune is built on the very thing that revolution is fighting against.
And at home, they are absolutely crushing it on green stuff. I mean, you go to Oslo, and Teslas are as common as Toyota Corollas. They power their own country almost entirely with clean hydropower. By a lot of measures, it really is a green utopia. But here's the paradox, the huge contradiction at the heart of it all. They're basically a drug dealer who doesn't use their own supply. They sell massive quantities of oil and gas to the rest of the world, take all that cash, go home, and drive their electric cars. And look, this isn't just an external criticism. It's a constant, agonizing debate inside Norway itself.
So how do they deal with this guilt? Well, one way is they use the fund as a weapon for good. They have an ethics council that blacklists certain companies from their portfolio on moral grounds. And when the world's biggest investor says they're selling your stock for ethical reasons, that's not just a financial hit. It's a huge reputational blow that can actually force companies to change their ways.
So what's the final lesson here? What's the takeaway from the story of Norway? Finding the oil, that was luck. But not squandering it, that was a choice. It was a choice built on sovereignty, on discipline, and on a really high degree of social trust. It kind of proves that a nation's greatest resource isn't what it digs out of the ground, but the character that guides its decisions. They see themselves as just temporary guardians of this national inheritance. The real question is, can that character endure?